What if forging steel could forge your doom? The clang of hammer against anvil echoes through time, an ancient rhythm with modern implications. In a world where artistry and danger collide, blacksmithing isn't just a craft, it's a treacherous dance with death. Each spark that flies from molten metal is a flicker of fate, each piece of iron shaped could turn into a weapon or a shackle. Are you skilled enough to shape destiny? Or will destiny shape you into a lifeless relic? Picture this, a forge, the air thick with smoke, the heat palpable, as you wrestle with the raw heart of the earth itself. You're not just bending metal, you're bending the very fabric of existence. An innocent craft? Hardly. One wrong maneuver, one careless slip, and the fire that fuels your passion becomes your funeral pyre. Blacksmiths have always walked a tightrope between creation and annihilation, a perilous path where one miscalculation brands you a traitor, a heretic, or worse, an executioner of your own kin. The medieval world is a cauldron of intrigue and danger, where alliances shift like shadows and the clang of a hammer could draw the ire of kings or the attention of thieves. A blacksmith is a maker of weapons, yes, but also a maker of enemies. The scent of iron in your nostrils could quickly be replaced with the stench of betrayal. Every blade forged could be the last thing a rival sees before the final curtain call. But it gets darker, because being a blacksmith isn't merely about the metal. It's about loyalty, survival, and the unrelenting grind of power plays. Each order could come from a noble desperate to crush dissent or a rebel looking to arm the oppressed. Who do you trust when the line between friend and foe blurs faster than the heat of a furnace? One slip of the tongue, one misplaced trust, and suddenly your forge is the epicenter of a civil war. And there's more. The secrets whispered in the dark, the forbidden techniques passed down from the ancients, these are not just stories, they're a ticking time bomb. What if the very knowledge that elevates you can also damn you? Imagine wielding power that could topple empires, yet knowing that even the slightest miscalculation could turn you into a martyr. So, you think you know the life of a blacksmith? Think again. With each swing of the hammer, you're flirting with fate, flirting with death itself. The heat warps your perspective. What was once a craft becomes a gamble with your very soul. Sharp tongues and sharper swords keep the stakes sky high, and in the world of blacksmithing, there's no safety net, only the abyss that awaits the unwary. The forge is a crucible of chaos, a swirling tempest of iron, ambition, and mortality. Blacksmithing could be your salvation, or it could be your death sentence. Are you ready to face the forge? Or will the flames consume you before you can even grasp the handle? The clock is ticking. The next swing might be your last. The clang of iron reverberates through the chilled air, a heartbeat against the silence of the night. Sparks fly like stars, momentarily illuminating the gaunt face of Cale, whose sweat-drenched brow glistens under the flickering light of the forge. He stands over the anvil, the hammer in his hand more a part of him than flesh. Each strike sends shockwaves through his bones, reminding him that pain and creation are two sides of the same coin. I remember when the fire first whispered my name, he mutters, his breath a cloud of smoke betraying the winter chill outside, siren songs wrapped in the glow of molten metal. But he isn't alone. There's Ilara, perched on the edge of the darkened doorway, shadows dancing across her features, the weight of something unsaid hanging heavy between them. She clutches a worn leather satchel, fingers trembling, as if she were cradling something fragile, precious. Cale, she murmurs, the word spilling from her lips like a prayer. You're burning yourself alive for a village that doesn't care. The anguish in her voice slices through the night, sharper than the very steel they mold. Cale's eyes flash, a mix of resentment and sorrow. They need me, he replies, each syllable a defiant strike against the truth battering at the edges of his resolve. Without blacksmiths, without me, they are nothing but shadows. Tools to survive. A promise of strength. His gaze drifts back to the forge, where the fire crackles and pulses, alive, a beast he has caged but never fully tamed. But Ilara's presence brings memories swirling like autumn leaves, laughter shared in the glow of a dying ember, secrets whispered as they watch the stars weave tales in the night sky. And what about us, Cale? What about the fire within? Her voice trembles, an ember in the wind. I remember when we dreamed, he says, his voice lower now, haunted. Before my hammer became my lover and the forge my prison. He doesn't dare meet her eyes, for fear of the truth lurking within them, of a love stifled by duty and sacrifice, like a flower wilting in the dark. Across the crowded streets of the village, shadows loom. They whisper of hunger, of pestilence, of a future painted in tones of ash. The people are hungry for more than just iron, they crave hope, yet they return to Cale's forge, day after day, as if it were a holy sanctuary. They bring old tools, rusted, broken, their spirits mirrored in the metalwork. With each broken blade he repairs, he feels a piece of himself slip away. The weight of their expectations clings to him like soot. Ilara shifts, stepping into the light, illuminating the scars etched on her hands, the marks of someone who has fought for every piece of their identity. You think you're their savior, Cale, but what if this is just another form of shackling? You're a craftsman, yes, but you're also a man. A man with dreams, not just the dreams of others. A flicker of doubt ignites in Cale's heart, but he crushes it quickly. If I abandon them, what am I left with? A ghost? A remnant? The forge roars behind him, a creature demanding to be fed. Sometimes, she says softly, the bravest thing is to set down the hammer. The air thickens, heavy with unspoken truths and a weight of history that wraps around them like a serpent. Cale thinks of the old tales, the legends of gods and men, and how blacksmiths were once revered as creators, each weapon forged a piece of their soul, every blade a promise of loyalty. He recalls the rituals, the blood offered to the forge, the incantations murmured under breath. It was more than just craft. It was breathing life into iron, coaxing a spirit from the fire. Do you remember the night we danced? He asks, voice almost a whisper, memories rushing back. They had stolen away from the village, wrapped in moonlight and laughter, bodies alive with fire and dreams, hearts beating to the rhythm of the universe. I do, she replies, her eyes shimmering with the ghosts of that night. And I remember a boy who had the world in his hands. A silence envelops them, thick and suffocating. Cale's hammer rests heavy in his grip, the weight of it like chains around his heart. He is not just a blacksmith, he is a keeper of dreams, a sculptor of fate. Ilara, he breathes, what if I am the one who breaks? What if you're the one who frees us? She counters, her voice a soft challenge. The forge crackles, and he feels the heat burn brighter, an echo of the past calling him home. Tonight, the boundaries blur. Can he forge something new from the remains of these dreams? Across the distant hills, the sky is an inkblot, swirling with the promises of dawn. And in the heart of that darkness, something stirs, a reckoning, a choice waiting to be made. Cale steps closer to her, the heat of the forge flickering between them, a delicate dance of fire and possibility. I can't abandon them, he whispers, the words trembling, barely held together by the weight of his own fear. Abandonment is not the answer, Cale. Sometimes we must break to be reborn. And then, they stand together, surrounded by the echoes of a past that haunts them, hope and despair waging war in their hearts. The forge crackles, the shadows stretch, and in that moment, they realize, they are both the craft and the creator, the dream and the dreamer, the fire and the ash. As the dawn creeps in, gilding the edges of the night with pale light, Cale grips the hammer, but now it feels different. It's not just a weight but a tool, a key to unlock the chains of their silenced dreams. In this sanctuary of smoke and steel, he feels the stirrings of something greater. A choice lies ahead, and it waits with bated breath. It is not the end, merely the beginning, the forge ready to shape not just iron, but the very fate of their existence. The air hums with anticipation, the night whispers of what is to come, and the world stretches out before them, both terrifying and beautiful. The air hummed with tension, thick and electric, as the sirens wailed in the distance, slicing through the night like a blade. I could feel the pulse of fear in my veins, a steady thrum that picked up speed with every frantic breath. I stood there, at the edge of the abandoned factory, the shadows leaching into my skin, warping reality into something grotesque. My heart raced, a caged animal, desperate to escape. I remember the night vividly, the echo of machinery long silent, a breath held in time, waiting to exhale. Paul was crouched beside the jagged remnants of a rusted cog, his hands trembling, not from the cold, but from the bitter dread pooling in the pit of his stomach. The man was a mechanic by trade, but that night, he was just a broken soul trying to piece together the fragments of his shattered life. I saw it in the way his fingers brushed over the metal, tender, almost reverential, yet terrified, as if the machinery could bite back. The tools of his trade had become twisted, no longer mere instruments of creation, but harbingers of destruction. "Just fix it, Paul," I urged, my voice trembling like a fragile leaf in a storm. "Please." He looked up, his eyes haunted, shadows dancing in the depths, as if darkness itself had taken residence within him. "You don't understand, Jess. It's not just a machine. It's all I have left." The desperation in his tone sent shivers down my spine, a raw, visceral truth hanging in the air like smoke. I remember the smell, the oil, the rust, the metallic tang of despair that clung to everything, suffocating in its enormity. We were surrounded by ghosts of industry, the skeletons of a world that had moved on while we remained trapped in a cycle of regret and longing. Each piece of abandoned equipment was a twisted reminder of human ambition, of dreams turned to nightmares. The flashlight flickered, and for a heartbeat, the shadows wriggled like serpents. "Paul," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "I think we should go." But he shook his head, his jaw clenched tight. "No. I can't leave it like this. Not again." I felt a weight settle on my chest, pushing the air from my lungs. Memories flooded in, the nights spent tinkering with engines, the thrill of creation, and the sharp, bitter edge of loss that came when things went wrong. I remember the way he used to smile when the machines roared to life, the way his laughter filled the air like music. It felt so far away now, like a fading echo in an empty hall. "Do you even remember what it was like?" he asked, his voice low, a mere whisper threatening to dissolve into the shadows. "When everything worked? When I could fix anything?" "Yes," I replied, a tremor running through me. "But this isn't just about fixing it. It's about what it costs." Paul's fingers traced the sharp edge of a broken tool, and in that moment, the warehouse felt like a spider's web, intricate yet fragile, each strand holding secrets too dark to confront. "I have to do this," he said, and there was a finality in his tone that sent a chill racing down my spine. And then there was Sarah, standing just outside the circle of light, a spectre in her own right, her face pale, the shadows carving lines of uncertainty across her features. She held a wrench in her hand, but it felt more like a weapon than a tool. "You think you can control it, don't you?" she said, her voice sharp as shattered glass. "You think you can fix everything?" Paul flinched, and the sound echoed through the hollow shell of the factory, a haunting note that lingered between us, a fracture in the fragile veneer of hope. I wanted to scream at them both, to shake them out of their self-inflicted stupor. "This isn't just machinery. It's a ticking time bomb." But the words lodged in my throat like raw, unpalatable fear. Outside, the sirens grew closer, their keening wail a reminder that danger was looming, creeping closer with each passing second. I remember feeling as if the world was folding in on itself, the edges blurring, merging with the shadows. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown, and I could almost feel the cold grip of panic wrapping around my throat. "Do you even realize what you're playing with?" I managed to say, my voice a trembling whisper. "The risks. The weight of this." Paul met my gaze, and for a flicker of time, the walls around him cracked. I saw the fear, the vulnerability that lay beneath his bravado, the child who once believed in the magic of machines. "But if I don't try," he trailed off, and the silence that followed was deafening. Then it happened. The darkness shifted, writhed. A spark ignited somewhere in the machine, a shuddering groan reverberating through the ground beneath us. My heart raced wildly, and I stumbled back, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gulps. The tools of his trade had awakened, and in that moment, I realized they were alive, hungry, and thrumming with a sinister energy. They were not just instruments, they were a reflection of our desperation. Each tool, each flickering light, held the weight of our failures, our ambitions, and our darkest fears. "Jess!" Paul shouted, but the sound felt distant, muffled like a dream fading away. The air thickened with an acrid scent, and in that brief, heart-stopping moment, I knew there was only one way forward. We had to confront the ghosts of our past, the demons that lay dormant in the machinery, waiting for the moment we dared to breathe life into them once more. Together, I whispered, my voice breaking, the word echoing in the hollow abyss of my heart. As the sirens crescendoed into a haunting symphony, I took a step forward, the shadows swelling around me, enveloping me in a chilling embrace. Paul's eyes locked onto mine, a flicker of hope igniting in the depths. I could feel it, a tension that crackled in the air, a fragile thread connecting us all. One last moment, one final breath before the plunge into chaos. The world swirled around, each heartbeat a countdown, and before us loomed the vast unknown, the tools of our trade, dangerous and powerful, waiting to unleash their fury. The choices we made now would echo through time, reverberating in the silence that would follow. In the end, we were not merely trying to fix a machine. We were trying to find ourselves again, reclaiming the pieces of our broken souls, even if it led us to the darkness. Yet, that darkness, sharp and foreboding, felt strangely like home. The clang of metal on metal echoed like a death knell, sharp enough to slice through the stifling heat of the forge. It was a sound that wrapped around Oliver like a vice, squeezing the breath from his lungs, pulling him deeper into a world of fire and fear. He stood there, sweat streaming down his brow, heart racing as flames danced dangerously close, licking at the edges of his leather apron. The forge was alive, a beast of iron and fire, and it demanded his respect, or it would consume him whole. "Focus, Oliver," shouted Martha, her voice cutting through the haze like the blade she shaped. She was a firebrand, fierce and commanding, eyes glinting with a mix of passion and terror. They had spent years together, bound by the heat of the forge and the weight of their shared failures. But today was different. Today, the air crackled with an electricity that felt almost sentient, whispering warnings, beckoning them to pay heed. The forge pulsed, flames leaping in frantic bursts, illuminating shadows that twisted and writhed like a living nightmare. Oliver's hand trembled as he reached for the hammer. Memories flickered in his mind, his father's calloused hands, the way he used to swing the hammer with precision, his laughter echoing in the acrid air. How long had it been since laughter had graced this place? Now, it was just them, struggling against the relentless heat, the insatiable hunger of the fire. "I remember," he muttered, a mantra against the rising tide of anxiety. "I remember the way it felt to strike the iron just right. I remember the joy in the spark." But the memory turned bitter, souring his stomach. Every swing felt like a reminder of what he had lost, a father, a mentor, a guide through the dark. Martha, too, was haunted by ghosts. Each swing of her hammer, each shaping of the metal, was infused with the spirits of her past, of her family, of dreams that had crumbled into ash. She paused, catching Oliver's eye, and in that moment, the air thickened with unspoken words. Her mouth opened, but the flames roared louder, drowning her out. "A fire hazard," she had said once, "can lie in wait, a silent predator, hidden behind the guise of warmth." They had all learned that lesson too late. The heat intensified, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. The forge had become a living entity, and it was hungry. Oliver felt it, a pull, a call to surrender to the fire, to let it take him. But his heart was still beating in defiance. "This isn't how it ends," he gasped, his voice barely rising above the hiss of the flames. And then, a sudden crack, sharp and foreboding. The old chimney, long neglected, trembled and shuddered, a warning sign that sent ice through his veins. He glanced at Martha, her eyes wide, the color draining from her face like blood from a wound. "Get back," he shouted, but the words were lost in the chaos. The world became a blur of molten steel and frantic movement as they scrambled through the heat and smoke, the shadows twisting around them in grotesque shapes. Everything felt slow and fast at once. Time warped, a cruel trickster. They were caught in a moment that stretched like taffy, thick and sticky, yet it flickered like a dying candle, threatening to snuff out their lives. "I can't," Martha choked out, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "I can't do this anymore." But how could they give up? How could they turn away from the flames that had defined them? The forge was their sanctuary and their prison, a place where they had sculpted not just metal but their very souls. Every piece they shaped bore the mark of their sweat, their tears, their resilience. No. Oliver cried, desperation clawing at his throat. We fight! We fight for every peace we've made, for everything we've lost. The fire roared, angry and insatiable, as if it sensed their resolve. It surged forward, a beast unchained. His hands shook, but he gripped the hammer tighter, channeling every ounce of his fear, his heartbreak into that single swing. Metal met metal with a resounding clash, sending sparks cascading like stars exploding. Each spark felt like a heartbeat, echoing in the chaos, pulling them closer to the brink. They were trapped in a dance with death, the flame swirling around them, threatening to engulf them whole. The heat became unbearable, wrapping around their throats like a noose. They could feel the consequences of their choices, the weight of every mistake pressing down upon them, but amidst the terror, a flicker of hope ignited. I remember, Oliver breathed, his voice steadying as he called upon every cherished memory, every moment of strength they had shared. I remember the way we came through the worst of it. We survived, didn't we? We forged our lives from the fire. Martha glanced at him, a flame igniting in her eyes, a mix of fear and fury. Then let's forge something new, she screamed, and with that, they struck the iron again, a synchronized rhythm that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. But the forge was relentless. It would not let them escape unscathed. Just as they felt the tide turning, a crack echoed through the chamber, then another. The chimney gave way, tumbling towards them like the weight of their past, a shadow of failure crashing into the present. The world erupted in chaos. Smoke choked their lungs, flames roared, and the forge howled in agony as it threatened to collapse around them. Oliver's heart raced. This was the heat of the forge, the moment when everything could be lost. But amidst the chaos, he felt something shift within him, a fierce determination to rise from the ashes, to fight, to survive. With one last swing, they struck, and in that moment, they didn't just shape metal, they shaped their destiny, their defiance against the consuming fire that sought to claim them. The heat was overwhelming, but so was the strength that ignited in their hearts. And as the forge trembled on the brink of destruction, they understood. The fire would always be a part of them, a reminder of their scars, their struggles. But it would not define them. They would emerge, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next, ready to forge a new path from the embers of their past. The hammer strikes the anvil, a thunderous heartbeat reverberating through the dimly lit workshop, echoing into the marrow of the earth. Sparks fly, tiny stars burst from the collision of metal and mallet. The air is thick with the sweet, acrid scent of burning coal and sweat, where heat wraps around you like a suffocating embrace. This is no ordinary day in the life of Thorn, the village blacksmith. Today, the weight of civilization hangs on his shoulders. Another day, another blade, he mutters, but the tremor in his voice betrays him. There's more than just iron and steel in the air, there's tension, thick and palpable. The village is restless, whispers of war swirling like the smoke from his forge. Thorn's hands are calloused and worn, but they tremble now, an oddity for a man who molds steel like gods shape destinies. He glances at the door, half expected to see an angry mob or a messenger bearing grim tidings. I remember the last time, he thinks, the day they came for the weapons. They took everything. They took my brother. The memory claws at him, sharp and unyielding. He can still see Rian, with his wild hair and fierce eyes, standing tall beside him. We'll fight, Rian had said, fire in his heart. But courage is a cruel mistress. The next dawn, Rian had not returned from the front lines, swallowed by shadows. From the corner of the forge, a figure stands, her silhouette framed by the flickering light. Ilara, the healer, a woman of strength wrapped in softness, her gaze steady yet filled with pain. She carries the burden of knowledge, her hands have soothed the wounds of the fallen, and her heart aches for every life lost to the insatiable hunger of war. You're working too hard, she says softly, but the words hang heavy in the air, thick with unspoken dread. You cannot forge a victory with this kind of grief. Thorn's heart tightens. He wants to tell her that grief is a fire that fuels him, an unquenchable flame that drives him to build more weapons, more shields, to protect what little remains of their shattered world. But he can't. Words are as hard to shape as iron. Instead, he grips the hammer tighter, swinging it down with a ferocity that sends tremors through his bones. The metal sings its sorrow, and with it, a part of him, the part that still believes in a future where blacksmiths are not just builders of weapons, but architects of peace, breaks. Ilara steps closer, her hands brushing against his, grounding him for a moment. You need to remember, Thorn. You create to protect, not to destroy. Her voice is a lifeline in the tempest, yet it drowns in the cacophony of his haunted memories. Remember, he shouts, the hammer clattering to the floor, a metallic sigh. What good is it to remember when all I can see is the blood of my kin soaking the soil? Each syllable slices the air, raw and jagged. Every piece I forge is a reminder of what we've lost. Every blade is a curse. Ilara's eyes widen, a storm brewing behind them. And if we do not fight? If we hide behind our grief, what then? Do you want to bury your brother's memory in cowardice? The challenge hangs like a noose, tightening around Thorn's throat, and he grapples with the force of her words. Meanwhile, shadows lengthen outside the forge, a scene unfolding like a sinister play. A group of men, clad in ragged cloaks, their faces twisted with desperation, gather at the edge of the village. They, too, are builders, once blacksmiths, farmers, fathers, now turned into targets by fate, wielding their anger like clubs. Whispers of rebellion curl through the streets like smoke, heavy with the scent of revolt. They converge toward Thorn's forge, their eyes wild with hunger for change, for justice, for blood. I remember the day the village turned, Thorn thinks, the memories crashing over him like waves. The day the king's men seized their grain, their labor, their very souls. They had come as saviors, but left a wake of ruin. Thorn, a voice calls from within the crowd. It's Callum, a former apprentice, a boy with dreams bigger than his frame. We need your blades. His voice is steeped in urgency, desperation thrumming through the air. They've taken everything. We can't stand idle while they crush us. Forge for us. A heartbeat, a pause that stretches like an eternity. Thorn glances at Ilara, whose eyes flicker with fear and resolve. She knows the path he stands at the edge of, it's a precipice, a choice between creation and destruction. Behind her, the forge glows with the embers of possibility, yet also the ashes of despair. Will we become what we fear? He whispers, the question clawing its way out, raw and exposed. The fires of his forge seem to dim, as if the very essence of his craft holds its breath, waiting for his decision, waiting to see if he'll become a builder of civilization or merely another target in a world gone mad. The villagers' chants begin, a rhythmic pounding in Thorn's chest, and the air thickens with a strange sweetness, an intoxicating mix of hope and dread. For freedom, they roar, a primal scream that pierces the night. The weight of the world presses down, heavy and unrelenting. And there it is, the moment, the split-second decision where destiny teeters. Will he strike the anvil with a hammer of rebellion, or will he shape the metal into tools of peace? The air crackles, electric with potential. Each heartbeat echoes the question, reverberating through his very soul. But as the hammer rises again, it's not the strength of his muscles that matters, it's the strength of his heart that will forge the truth in the fire of this spiraling chaos. The blacksmith and the healer, the village and the rebels, all caught in a dance of creation and destruction, the forge swelling with the weight of their choices. The hammer falls, and it's the sound of 1,000 futures colliding into one. Fire roared in the belly of the forge, its heat licking at the air like a hungry beast. Sparks exploded like stars, flaring up into the soot-stained rafters, each one a fleeting moment, extinguished before it could take root. The hammer fell, a thunderous heartbeat, metal against metal, sending shockwaves through the marrow of the earth. I remember that sound, the way it shattered the silence of dawn, like a war cry echoing through distant valleys. But this was not a battlefield, it was home, and I, a blacksmith, an unholy creator of beauty and destruction. My hands, calloused and stained, gripped the handle of the hammer, the weight of it familiar yet heavy with a new gravity. Each swing felt like a desperate prayer. I was forging swords, not for glory but for survival. The kingdom was at war, and my village was a mere blip on the enemy's radar. I could hear them, the soldiers' boots slamming against the cobblestones, the rustle of armor, the growls of men ready to rip apart lives. My heart raced in tandem with the rhythm of the hammer, a frantic dance between life and annihilation. Then there was Elara, my sister. She stood by the door, her silhouette framed in the golden light of the forge, but her face was a storm cloud. I could see the tension coiling in her posture. "Do you think you can forge peace with that?" she spat, gesturing at the fiery anvil. "You're just making weapons for their slaughter, brother." Her words cut deeper than any sword I could create. The truth of them stung, a bitter poison trickling down my throat. I remember the way her eyes flashed, fierce as the flames that danced behind me. "What's the difference between creation and destruction?" she demanded, voice trembling. "You shape metal, but what about souls?" "Every blade has its purpose," I replied, the words tasting of ash. But I knew their edge was dulled by doubt. I remembered our father's hands, once steady as the hammer fell, now just ghosts in the dim corners of my mind. He had taught me the craft, the delicate balance between art and aggression. But did he teach me how to live with the consequences? I swung the hammer again, fury and frustration laced with every strike. Each blow echoed the chaos outside, a reminder that our very lives hung by the finest thread. The clang rang like a bell tolling for the dead, and still, I hammered. I had to believe that these weapons could protect us. A part of me clung to the hope that I could forge a shield strong enough to hold back the tide of violence. But another part whispered a darker truth: in crafting the means of war, was I not complicit in the bloodshed? The door creaked open wider, and in stepped Rowan, the village's scout, his face a mask of urgency. "They're coming!" His breath came in gasps, panic swirling in his eyes like a tempest. "The enemy is gathering at the edge of the wood. They want our land, our lives." I felt the world tilt, the ground beneath me shifting. I could almost hear the whispers of those who had fallen before, their ghosts rising up, reminding me of the fine line I walked. "Rowan, you have to take what I've made. The swords, the shields, they're ready." I forced the words out, but they felt like stones lodged in my throat. "No." Elara's voice sliced through the air. "You can't send them to their death. We need to hide, to flee." Her eyes bore into me, pleading, desperate to yank me from the brink of my own making. But I was a blacksmith, forged by the fires of history, and the weight of my duty pressed down like the anvil itself. "What is hiding but a slow death?" I shot back, feeling fury blaze. "This is our home, not just a spot on a map. If we don't fight for it, we lose everything." In that moment, time twisted, and the forge morphed into a battlefield, a cacophony of clashing swords, the stench of smoke and blood, the screams of men and women caught in the throes of fate. I could see Elara there, her hand stained crimson, not from the forge but from the struggle of survival. I could see Rowan, a blade raised high, his expression a mix of terror and resolve. I could feel my heart pounding with the rhythm of war. "Creating weapons means choosing a side, brother," Elara's voice quaked, breaking the fevered dream. "And every choice has a cost." Her eyes glimmered, tears pooling, threatening to spill over. The vulnerability etched on her face was a wound that refused to heal, and I felt it deep within me, a dark chasm of despair. In that moment, I understood. I was trapped in my own cycle of creation, each swing of the hammer a battle cry and a lament, a birth of possibility and an invitation to destruction. The forge, once a sanctuary, had morphed into a crucible where dreams were twisted into nightmares. The swords I made shimmered with promise but were also stained with the weight of lives yet to be taken. "Then let's choose to create something more," I said, my voice cracking under the weight of realization. "Let's forge a future worth fighting for." The fire flickered, a ghostly dance that echoed the uncertainty of hope. But as the shadows lengthened, creeping closer, I knew that not even the brightest flames could banish the darkness. Elara stepped forward, her hands trembling, fingers brushing against the cool metal of a blade. "But can you be both the creator and the destroyer?" The question hung in the air, heavy and full of dread, and I felt the cracks forming within me, a fracture line that threatened to consume us all. A distant rumble echoed from the edge of the woods, the drums of war beating a rhythm of inevitability. I turned back to the forge, the fire crackling, the metal glowing. A shiver ran down my spine as I understood that creation and destruction intertwined, like a dance of shadows beneath a crescent moon. The confrontation loomed like a storm on the horizon, and I was at the center of the tempest. As I lifted the hammer once more, the weight of it felt different, a burden and a blessing, a weapon and a choice, a line drawn in the sand between survival and surrender. I hammered down, and the sound echoed louder than the drums of war, a promise, a plea, a question. What would I create, and at what cost? And in that moment of uncertainty, the forge glowed bright, illuminating the darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. The roar of the forge echoed through the night, a guttural growl that rattled the bones of the village. Sparks flew like angry fireflies, illuminating the shadows that gripped the backs of those who dared to linger too close. The air was thick with the scent of burning coal mixed with fear, as if the very earth trembled at the whims of the blacksmith's hammer. You could feel it, the tension, palpable and sharp as a blade. It was in that moment, as the anvil sang its metallic lament, that I saw him, the blacksmith, his muscles coiling with the weight of history and expectation. He was a giant of a man, his once bright eyes now dimmed by secrets too heavy to bear. Tarek, the blacksmith, was haunted. Shadows danced across his face, and I could see the flicker of old dreams dying within him. He was a man forged in fire, yet somehow, he was as fragile as the steel he shaped. The legend of the blacksmith was a cruel irony, a tapestry woven with threads of terror and awe, each story bleeding into the next, until it became impossible to discern where reality ended and myth began. And then there was Elara, the village healer, sharp, resilient, yet inflicted with a heart-thumping fear of the man who had once saved her. I remember her laughter, once a melody that floated through the air, now a ghostly echo. She edged closer, her hands trembling as she clutched her satchel of herbs, the weight of her own conflict pulling her down like a heavy cloak. Her gaze flickered from Tarek to the ground, the unspoken tension between them electrifying the air. She had trusted him once, had believed in the tales of his prowess, but those stories had turned from sweet to bitter, like curdled milk left to fester. A chill swept through the night as a wailing wind clawed at the edges of our memories, dredging up the past. I could see it in their eyes, the flicker of ghosts hovering just beyond the veil. Every heartache, every betrayal, whispered through the cracks of their shared history. Tarek's hammer struck the anvil, each blow a heartbeat, each spark a reminder of the life they had once led. Elara flinched, fingers grazing the vial of nightshade at her side, the very essence of danger wrapped in delicate glass. "Do you remember?" she asked, the words barely escaping her lips, tremors of fear lacing her voice. "Do you remember when you saved me from the wolf?" The wolf. That beast had been a harbinger of doom, stalking the fringes of our dreams. Tarek had charged headlong into the darkness, brandishing nothing but a crude sword and a reckless heart. He had been our hero, but heroes are often carved from the same stone as villains. Each life he saved, a weight upon his soul, each life he took, a shadow added to his already burdened spirit. "I remember," Tarek said, his voice a deep rumble, like the distant thunder that promised a storm. "But that was a lifetime ago. The blacksmith is no longer a hero." His hammer fell, a finality echoed in the clang that vibrated through the ground, reaching deep into the bowels of the earth. It felt like a tolling bell, each note a warning, a promise of danger, as if fate itself were watching, waiting to see what we would do next. The air hung heavy, thick with unsaid words, and the silence was a heavy cloak draped over us, smothering and full of dread. I stepped closer, drawn into their orbit like a moth to flame, feeling the crackling energy between them, a storm ready to break. "Every time you swing that hammer," Elara whispered, tears threatening to break free, "you're a step closer to becoming the monster you fear." The truth of her words clawed at Tarek. I could see it in the way his hands trembled, the way his brow furrowed as memories danced around the edges of his mind. The blacksmith was trapped in a cycle of self-destruction, every swing of his hammer a clash against the chains that bound him to his past. He was both creator and destroyer, an artist of agony, a sculptor of sorrow. "Stop," he growled, the rage rising like smoke from a dying fire. "You don't understand. You never understood what it means to wield this power." And there it was, raw and unfiltered. The vulnerability of a man who wore his scars as armor. I could feel the atmosphere shift, the tension tightening like a noose around our throats. Elara's breath hitched, the realization sinking deeper than any blade could pierce. "I know danger, Tarek," she whispered, her voice a soft lament. But I also know that the greatest danger lies not in the hammer you wield but in the darkness that lurks within. A beat hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths, and suddenly, the forge became a crucible, each of us trapped in our own flame, burning and boiling, metamorphosing into something unrecognizable. Shadows twisted around us, whispers of the past clawing at our sanity, each revealing a piece of the legend we had become entangled in. The clock in the village square struck midnight, its chimes resonating like a heartbeat, echoing through the ancient stones. Time seemed to warp, each second stretching into eternity, and I could feel the world around us holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. A storm was brewing, not just in the sky but within the hearts of those gathered beneath the glowing embers of the forge. I knew then that this was more than a moment, it was a reckoning. It was a collision of fates, a dance on the razor's edge between salvation and doom, where every choice held the weight of their fractured souls. I could only watch as Tarek and Elara stood on the precipice, the flames of their past illuminating the darkness of their future, a future that shimmered like a mirage, always just out of reach. And as the sparks flew and the shadows closed in, I could only think, sometimes, the most dangerous legends are the ones we create ourselves. The hammer strikes the cold metal, a sharp clang echoing in the dim workshop. I can taste the iron in the air, sharp and bitter, as if it were a cruel reminder of the world outside. I remember the first time I tried to forge something, how the flames danced like spirits mocking my feeble attempts. Now, each blow is a desperate plea, a heartbeat echoing in sync with the rhythm of my despair. Outside, the rain beats down, relentless, drowning the cries of the market. I know they're out there, the hawkers yelling their wares like sirens, drawing in the unwary, but in here, it's just me, the metal, and the ghosts of dreams unfulfilled. I glance up at the flickering lantern, its light stuttering with fear. Shadows leap across the walls, grotesque and mocking, taunting me with the weight of my failures. I remember when I thought my crafts would be enough, when I believed that talent could carve a path through the chaos of life like a knife through soft bread. That was before the guild turned its back, before the noblemen decided my work was worth less than the dirt on their boots. I struggle against the creeping dread, the cold claws of hopelessness curling around my throat. Across the room, Clara stands with arms crossed, her eyes dark pools of unyielding sorrow, flickering flames of anger barely contained. She used to believe in me, in us. It's not just the market, she says, her voice tight, holding back the flood. It's them, the people who decide what is worth living for. They don't see us. They don't see our struggle. I watch her face contort in pain, and it cuts deeper than any blade. I remember the warmth of her laughter, how it used to fill this space, how it used to drown out the darkness. But laughter has turned into whispers of fear, like the flicker of the dying flame. Maybe the world has no place for artisans anymore, I say, a hollow sound in the vastness of our despair. Maybe we're just relics of a time long gone. No. You can't think like that. Clara shouts, and the fire in her voice is a spark, igniting something deep within me. You're not a relic, you're a craftsman. You've poured your soul into every piece you make. You breathe life into metal. Her words hang heavy between us, electrified. But I feel like a ghost in my own life, trapped in a body that once thrummed with promise. I remember when we were young, laughing at the madness outside, spinning dreams like silk from our fingertips. We'll change the world, we'd say, two idealists with stars in our eyes and fire in our hearts. But the world is a hungry beast, and it chews up hope with a ruthless efficiency. I think of the nights spent crafting, the dedication that turned to obsession, the blisters, the bruises, the endless cycle of trying to create something beautiful in a world that rewards only the ugly. Then there's Thomas, the quiet one, hiding in the corner like a timid shadow. The weight of his failures drapes over him like a shroud, his hands trembling as he attempts to carve a small figurine, a delicate figure of a woman with wings, poised for flight. I just want to make something that matters, he whispers, as if afraid the very act of speaking will shatter the fragile hope hovering in the air. I want to reach out and tell him he matters, that his artistry is a flicker of light in a world darkened by greed and indifference, but I can barely breathe through my own shame. Don't let them take that from you, I say, but my voice falters, muddied by doubt. I see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a reflection of my own. We are all prisoners of our circumstances, shackled by an economy that thrives on the exploitation of souls like ours. Keep creating, I urge him, even as I feel the words slip through my fingers like sand. Even if it's just for you. But the truth is, it's hard to create when your heart is heavy with the weight of survival. I can feel the market collapsing around us, a sinking ship dragging us all into the depths of despair. They say artisans are the lifeblood of culture, but culture is a luxury, and we are left gasping for air beneath the waves of neglect. As Clara paces, her silhouette flickers in the lantern light, and I remember, our dreams once felt like the cosmos, vast and full of potential. But now, they are mere echoes of what could have been, swallowed by relentless tides of economic uncertainty. The clock ticks ominously, a cruel reminder that time waits for no one, especially not for those of us who dare to dream. Why do we even bother? I mutter, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Why do we keep fighting when we are nothing more than whispers in the wind? Clara stops, her eyes locking onto mine, a storm brewing within. Because if we don't fight, we disappear. We become nothing. Her voice wavers, but there's a fire in her words, and it ignites something deep within me. In that dim workshop, amidst the shadows and the looming darkness, a flicker of hope emerges, a small, tender flame, desperately holding on against the encroaching night. We may be vulnerable, but we are still here. And as long as there's breath in our lungs, as long as we wield our tools, we can carve our place in this world, regardless of the cost. The fight may be futile, but it is ours. I glance back at Thomas, who continues to carve, his hands trembling yet resolute. And Clara, fierce and unyielding, stands beside me, a flame in the dark. The air is heavy with tension, and the rain continues to fall, but in this moment, we are alive. We are artisans, and our struggle is not for naught. The hammer rings out again, a heartbeat resonating through the night. The struggle is far from over, but for now, we stand together in the shadows, ready to face whatever comes next. The forge was alive, a beast of iron and blaze, breathing its fiery breath into the stillness of night. The clang of metal against metal rang like a war cry against the encroaching darkness, but beneath that furious melody lurked a phantom, an unseen killer, whispering in the smoke like a lover's promise gone wrong. I remember standing there, my heart thundering, sweat mixing with soot, the air thick with the sweet, sickly scent of burning coal. It filled my lungs, heavy and suffocating, each inhalation a treacherous gamble. I can't, Jason's voice broke through the cacophony, raw and desperate. He was hunched over the anvil, face pallid with the pallor of a ghost. The flickering glow of the forge painted shadows across his features, accentuating the gauntness of his cheeks, the feverish gleam in his eyes. I can't breathe. Just keep going. I barked, panic clawing at my throat. My own breath felt like shards of glass scraping against my insides. The fumes coiled around us like serpents, tightening their grip, laughing at our struggle. We were trapped in a dance with danger, the air thick with the metallic tang of iron and something far more sinister. Tracy was at the far end of the shop, her hands trembling as she struggled to mold the glowing metal. She had once held ambition in her palms, dreams of creating beauty from fire, but now those dreams were dulled by the toxic fog that settled like a shroud over us. I saw her cough, the sound jagged, like glass breaking underfoot, and my heart splintered at the sight. She was losing the battle, and every second felt like a countdown to oblivion. "Tracy!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed whole by the roar of the forge. I could see the heaviness in her shoulders, the way her spirit flickered like the dying embers beneath the forge. It wasn't just the smoke, it was the betrayal of a place we once loved, now transformed into a chamber of horrors. "Get out! Now!" But she wouldn't move. She stood there, rooted, as if her dreams were chained to the anvil, weighted down by the very air meant to inspire her. I remembered the laughter we shared, how we joked about the heat, how we fantasized about the masterpieces we'd create. Now, those echoes felt like ghosts, specters of a happiness that had been consumed by fire and fumes. "Jason!" I turned to him, my stomach twisting. "We have to get out. The fumes, I know." His voice rose, trembling with a mix of fear and rage. But it's too late. What if we leave her? The room felt like it was closing in, the very walls tightening around us. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, each thud resonating with an urgency that screamed at me to make a choice. I glanced back at Tracy, her eyes were glazed, a faraway look that sent ice coursing through my veins. I remembered watching her work, each strike of the hammer a testament to her passion, her artistry. That passion was slipping away, replaced with the heaviness of despair. No! I shouted, my voice breaking, the panic clawing at my throat. We can't leave her. We can't, but the forge roared back, a beast demanding sacrifice. The air thickened, an invisible fog wrapping around our throats, squeezing until our breath came in shallow gasps. I felt it creeping in, a slow poison that crawled through my veins, tying my heart to the fire, binding me to this nightmare. I remember the first time we lit the forge, my mind drifted, memories flickering like shadows against the flames. We were invincible. We thought we could conquer the world. But now, the world felt heavy, weighed down by the irony of our creation. The very craft that gave us purpose had turned deadly. My hand shook as I gripped the edge of the anvil, willing myself to move, to act. Time stretched, each second heavy with the weight of choices unmade. The clock on the wall ticked away, its sound eerie in the oppressive silence, each tick a reminder of our mortality. Tracy! I screamed, but my voice felt distant, lost in the haze. Her name echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain. Please? You have to listen to me. But the forge didn't care. It breathed toxic fumes that wrapped around us with every heartbeat, each inhalation a reminder of our fragility. I could feel it now, something sinister lurking in the air, an unseen claw grasping at our throats. The colors in the room blurred, merging into a sickly palette of gray and black. Each breath was a battle, each moment a struggle against the inevitable. Jason, we have to go! I shouted, desperation clawing at my insides like a wild animal. If we stay, we'll die here. And then, the realization struck me, this was no longer just a forge. It was a tomb, a place where dreams came to die, suffocated by the very air we breathed. The shadows danced, mocking our plight, and I felt the walls closing in, the forge a living entity of fire and death. I choked, the memory swirling like smoke around me. I remember what it was like to dream. But those dreams were slipping away, fading into the smoke, into the darkness. I turned back to Tracy, her silhouette flickering like a candle on the verge of extinguishing. There was a spark of fear etched across her face, the realization that we were trapped in a nightmare of our own making. Please? I pleaded, voice breaking, heart racing. We have to fight. But the forge roared again, a final jolt of agony, and I felt the heat wrap around me like a lover's embrace, seductive yet deadly. I was caught between fire and fate, the air a thick blanket of dread. Every second stretched into eternity, a heartbeat away from the abyss. I didn't know if we could escape, if we could break free from the clutches of this forge that had become our prison. All I could feel was the weight of our choices pressing down, the echoes of our laughter now mingling with the cries of despair. And then, in that moment, beneath the choke of smoke and the roar of the flames, I realized, this was our reckoning. This was not just a battle for breath, but a fight for our souls, a fight for redemption from the shadows that haunted us. The forge was alive, and so were we, caught in a dance of survival, the air heavy with the promise of poison. Time stopped, and we were left to confront the darkness, staring into its depths, daring to reclaim our light. The clang of iron on iron pierced the air, a brutal symphony of chaos and despair. Sparks flew like angry fireflies, illuminating the faces of men lost in their labor, oblivious to the impending doom. I remember the smell of sweat, mingled with coal and a hint of something acrid, fear, perhaps, as it hung heavy in the forge. It was the kind of place where dreams were twisted into reality, yet reality could just as easily twist into nightmares. I was there, shoulder to shoulder with them, men who bore the scars of their trade like badges, rough hands, and weary eyes betraying stories of labor and loss. I remember Samuel, a giant of a man, his laughter booming like thunder, filling the cramped space with warmth. He was a father, a husband, and a dreamer who believed in better days. Then there was Thomas, slight and sharp-witted, always quick with a jest to lighten the mood. He wore his insecurities on his sleeve like a tattered flag, hoping to be seen as more than just another cog in the relentless machinery of the forge. And finally, there was me, a mere observer, a chronicler of their lives caught in this vicious grind. On that fateful day, I stood behind them, unseen, a ghost lingering at the edge of their world. I saw the way Samuel's brow furrowed as he lifted a glowing iron rod, its molten heart pulsating with potential. I remember the moment he turned to Thomas, eyes alight with mischief. "Let's give the old girl a spark," he said, grinning ear to ear, unaware of the fatal spark that would ignite the very air around us. And then, silence. A heartbeat stretched into eternity, a fragile moment before chaos erupted. The shift's rhythm faltered as the furnace roared, unleashing an inferno of unbridled rage. Flames licked at the rafters, and my heart raced, a caged beast clawing for escape. I remember the look on Samuel's face as realization dawned, the laughter fading like smoke, replaced by a terror I had never witnessed before. "Get back," he bellowed, but his warning was swallowed by the monstrous roar of the fire. Chaos reigned. The world spun in shades of red and orange. I saw Thomas stumble, his eyes wide with disbelief as a shower of sparks rained down like the wrath of a vengeful god. I remember time warping, stretching, a cruel joke as I watched Samuel reach for him, a desperate plea written across his features. Their camaraderie, forged in laughter and hard work, was now a tether threatening to snap. "Grab my hand!" Samuel screamed, his voice barely rising above the cacophony. But fate is a fickle mistress. I saw the moment the beam above them cracked, a slow, inevitable groan that echoed the agony in my chest. It was a sound that would haunt me, a premonition of despair. In the blink of an eye, the world tilted, shadows danced, and the beam fell like a guillotine, its descent swift and merciless. The sickening thud was drowned in the wail of metal and flesh, a cacophony of horror that reverberated through the forge. And just like that, the laughter died. I remember the silence that followed, a void so profound it swallowed the very essence of life. The flames flickered, gasping as if the forge itself mourned the loss of its children. Thomas lay still, a broken figure beneath the debris, while Samuel cradled him in a way only a brother could, the disbelief etching lines of grief and guilt across his once jubilant face. I wanted to scream, to claw at the air, to shake them from this nightmare, but I was bound by an invisible thread, a witness to their tragedy. "Wake up, Thomas!" Samuel's voice cracked, a raw edge of desperation slicing through the stillness. But there was no response, only the eerie whisper of ash settling around them, a blanket of sorrow draped over a once vibrant soul. I could see the flicker of hope dim in Samuel's eyes, a dying flame extinguished by the weight of reality. For a moment, I wished for time to rewind, to clutch at the threads of fate weaving through that very hour, to snatch Samuel and Thomas from the jaws of death. But time is a cruel mistress, relentless and unforgiving. I felt the heartache cling to me like the smoke that filled the room, wrapping around my throat, choking the breath from my lungs. In the days that followed, the forge became a haunted place, echoes of laughter replaced by memories that clung like cobwebs to the walls. Samuel's hands, once steady and sure, trembled as he worked, the weight of his loss pressing down upon him like the anvil he forged upon. I watched as the light in his eyes dimmed, eclipsed by the shadows of regret. And then there was Thomas's family, their grief a palpable thing. I remember the day they came to the forge, eyes searching, hoping to find remnants of their beloved son. The air was thick with unspoken words, the sorrow hanging like a heavy fog. Samuel stood before them, a ghost of the man he once was, the weight of guilt settling over his shoulders like chains. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the words felt insufficient, a feeble offering in the face of such overwhelming loss. I watched, feeling the ache in my chest swell, as the mother cried, her sobs tearing through the silence, raw and unrelenting, echoing the pain that had burrowed deep within us all. The forge became a mausoleum of sorts, a place where dreams were once forged and now lay scattered like shards of broken glass. I remember seeing Samuel one last time, alone beneath the starless sky, his silhouette framed against the darkness. It was there that I realized the forge had claimed more than just lives, it had consumed hope, laughter, and the bonds of friendship. And so, I stand here, a silent observer, a chronicler of the pain that lingers in the shadows. The forge continues to burn, a relentless heartbeat in the quiet town, a reminder that life, in all its brutality and beauty, is an unpredictable dance with consequences, a constant reminder of the fragility of existence. I remember the laughter, the friendship, the tragedy, and it echoes in my mind. The memories are a forge of their own, shaping my soul into something heavier, something that can never quite forget. In the deep night, with shadows creeping and time slipping away, I find myself listening for the sounds of the forge. I wait, breathless and still, as if the ghosts of Samuel and Thomas might yet return, reminding us that in the face of tragedy, love and loss are forever intertwined in the dance of life. The air crackled. A single spark flew from the forge, a tiny ember of rebellion in the darkened workshop, where shadows conspired against the flickering light. I stood, heart pounding, the smell of hot metal and sweat mingling in the corners of my mind, where fear and ambition collided like hammer on anvil. My hands, a blend of callous and youth, clutched the tongs, trembling, the weight of the iron as heavy as the responsibility that settled on my shoulders. This moment was everything I had dreamt of, and yet, it felt like standing on the edge of a sword blade, one misstep away from oblivion. Focus! Garrett's voice cut through the haze, sharp as the edge of a freshly forged dagger. He was my mentor, my blacksmith, and a man shaped by iron and fire, with eyes that glimmered with the remnants of his own lost dreams. I remember the first time I stepped into this workshop, the way his laughter rang like the clang of steel, promising me a future that shimmered like blade in the sun. But now, the laughter felt distant, twisted beneath the heavy cloak of expectation. I had made mistakes before. The day I mistook the temperature of the metal, a glowing red that should have been a warning, I had plunged it into water, the hiss of steam a wicked symphony of failure. But this was different, a molten piece in my grip, it felt alive, a hungry beast, waiting for my command. My heart was a wild drum now, echoing in the cavernous space, drowning out all rational thought. Breathe, boy. You're not drawing blood. Garrett barked, his irritation laced with a hint of concern. His hands, scarred and strong, worked the forge as if coaxing a reluctant partner into a dance. I could see the pride and the burden battling behind his weathered skin. He was a man forged in the fires of his own mistakes, and yet here I was, ready to forge my own doom. Right, breathe. I took in a shaky breath, a mix of iron and wood smoke filling my lungs. But the air was thick with unspoken fears too, fears of failure, of disappointing Garrett, of becoming the very thing I had sworn I would never be. The apprentice who broke a promise, the boy who couldn't grasp the fire. And then came Myra, sudden and fierce, like the cold wind that howls through the night. She was my friend and rival, with wild curls that danced around her face like flames, laughter bubbling up from the depths of her spirit. You're sweating more than a pig in a butcher's shop, she teased, but her eyes were sharp, assessing, searching for cracks in my bravado. I wanted to smile, to banter back, but the fear constricted my throat like a noose. Don't you dare mess this up, Finn, she continued, her tone shifting, a flicker of genuine concern crossing her features. Garrett's counting on you. We all are. Those words struck deeper than any hammer. The weight of the forge pressed down on me, the shadows stretching, elongating, whispering tales of every apprentice who had succumbed to the flames, to the forge that had devoured their dreams whole. I could feel them lurking, ghosts of failure urging me to falter, to let the molten iron slip from my grip. Garrett! I shouted suddenly, urgency bursting forth. What if I can't do this? His gaze turned toward me, a storm of annoyance and empathy swirling in his eyes. You learn by doing, Finn. You can't forge steel without the fire. Embrace it, or it will consume you. Embrace. A word that felt like a betrayal, a twisted notion that I could somehow dance with the flames, rather than let them scorch my very soul. But as the heat pulsed around me, I could feel it, the sharp edge of possibility and the soft, ugly breath of failure brushing against my neck. The forge roared, a sound that reverberated through my bones, a siren call that mixed fear with exhilaration. I plunged the iron into the flames, feeling the heat licking at my skin, the energy humming like a live wire. Each second stretched, a taut thread ready to snap. I wanted to collapse into the comfort of doubt, to cry out that this was not for me, that I was merely a boy with dreams too big for this world. But Myra stepped forward, her presence a balm against the chaos. "You got this, Finn. Just remember what we practiced." Her voice was a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink. I could see the fire reflected in her eager eyes, and for a moment, the shadows receded. In that shared heartbeat, I understood, this was more than just steel and fire, it was a dance we were all part of, a tapestry woven from our fears and hopes. And so, I steadied myself, the iron glowing a furious orange against the dark backdrop of the workshop. I swung the hammer, the impact reverberating through my body. Each strike was a heartbeat, a prayer, a question: could I withstand the pain? Could I forge not just metal, but a future? But suddenly, a crack, a high-pitched scream of metal meeting metal. The iron shattered, sending shards flying into the air like stars bursting from a dying galaxy. I froze, fear spiraling. A moment of silence, then Garrett's shout, "Get down!" The world slowed, a nightmare unfolding in real time. I dove, and the explosion of fragments whizzed past, a cruel reminder of how quickly dreams could turn to debris. I felt the rush of wind against my skin, the metallic tang of blood and sweat mixing in my mouth as I hit the ground. As the dust settled, the realization sank in, heavy and cold. I had made my first mistake, a lesson learned the hard way. I lay there, breathless, my heart a wild creature thrumming against my ribs, half terrified, half exhilarated. "Finn!" Myra cried, scrambling to my side, her hands shaking as they brushed over me, searching for the damage. "Are you okay?" I sputtered, "just my pride." Garrett was silent, his expression stormy, caught somewhere between anger and concern. I saw it in his eyes, the weight of my failure, the risk I had taken. But then, slowly, a smirk broke through, and laughter bubbled from his lips, surprising us all. "Welcome to blacksmithing, lad. It's not for the faint of heart." And in that moment, I knew. This was the beginning, not just of training, but of a reckoning. A cycle of fire and steel, of mistakes and growth, of learning to dance with the flames rather than being consumed by them. The forge would be my crucible, and through it, I would find my true self. A heartbeat lingered, pregnant with potential, the echoes of our laughter mingling with the lingering shadows, whispering promises of what was to come. I ached for the next strike, the next lesson, the next risk. I was an apprentice, yes, but also a dreamer, a fighter. And I would learn, oh how I would learn. The clang of metal on metal echoed through the dimly lit forge, a heartbeat in the stillness of the night, a song sung by the flames licking at the iron. Mary's hands trembled as she held the glowing piece, the heat searing her palms, but the fire inside her burned hotter. She could hear the whispers of her ancestors, women who had wielded hammers long before her, their stories tangled in the very iron she forged. Yet here she was, a woman in a man's world, surrounded by shadows that grew heavier with each strike of the hammer. "Mary, you'll ruin it," a voice barked from behind her, drenched in disdain. Thomas, the master blacksmith, loomed in the doorway, arms crossed, his disapproval cutting deeper than any blade. She could feel the weight of his gaze, a stone pressing down on her chest, threatening to extinguish her fire. "You're no blacksmith, you belong in the kitchen." Her heart raced. Was it anger? Pain? A mixture of both? She gritted her teeth, the taste of iron filling her mouth, the metallic tang a reminder that she was not just a woman, she was an artisan, a creator. "I remember my father's hands, calloused and strong," she whispered, more to herself than to him, and the way he spoke of metal like it was alive. She could almost hear his voice, guiding her, urging her not to back down. But the ghost of his encouragement echoed in a hollow chamber, overshadowed by the spectre of Thomas' disapproval. In the dim light, shadows danced, whispering secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Clara, her best friend, stood in the corner, her eyes wide, reflecting the flames like twin moons, a mix of admiration and fear. Clara was a quiet force, a kindred spirit who had fought her own battles, an orphan taken in by a family that treated her as little more than a servant. "Don't listen to him," Clara murmured, her voice barely above a breath. "You're stronger than they think." But how could Mary be strong when the world around her felt so intent on breaking her? Every hammer blow against the anvil felt like a reminder of the walls closing in. She had dreamed of this moment, the forge as her sanctuary, but now the air crackled with tension, the weight of centuries of gender roles pressing down like the anvil itself. "Forget dreams, Mary. A woman doesn't belong here," Thomas spat, his voice harsh like steel scraping against stone. The words hung heavy in the air, thickening with disdain. Clara flinched at the venom, her face etched with a mixture of sympathy and horror. Mary's heart raced, each heartbeat a drum echoing the battle waging within her. "I remember the first time I melted iron," she said, her voice rising, trembling yet fierce. "I remember the way the orange glow danced in my eyes, how it felt to breathe life into something lifeless. I'm not just a woman, I'm a blacksmith." The fire flickered, responding to her words, and for a moment, she felt invincible, as if the forge itself roared in agreement. "Enough!" Thomas bellowed, the sound reverberating like thunder. He swept toward her, looming like a storm cloud, and for a fleeting moment, she saw not just his anger but a reflection of every man who had ever belittled a woman's worth, every voice that had sought to drown her dreams in ridicule. Fear clawed at her throat, but she would not let it consume her. The anvil glinted in the dim light, a cold reminder of the truth: the world was an unforgiving place for women who dared to dream. But dreams, she reminded herself, were forged in fire. "If I fail," she said, voice shaking yet resolute, "I will do it on my own terms." Clara stepped forward, a small act of defiance, her face flushed with urgency. "Thomas, you don't understand. She's a natural. Silence." He snapped, eye spitting daggers. "You too, Clara. You think you can follow her into this madness?" But Clara wouldn't back down. "Madness? It's a gift. This is her calling. You see her as weak, but she is strength personified. You're afraid, Thomas, of what we could become." Her voice trembled, but with each word, the fire in Mary's heart surged, threatening to consume her fears whole. The tension in the forge was palpable, the air thickened with possibility. A storm brewed, not outside, but within the hearts of the women holding the future of blacksmithing in their hands. Mary took a step back, letting the heat of the forge bathe her in strength, the whispers of her ancestors urging her on. And in that moment, with steel and fire, the past collided with the present, setting the stage for a battle that transcended mere craftsmanship. It was more than just blacksmithing, it was a fight for identity, for a place in a world woven tightly with the threads of tradition and exclusion. The clang of their spirits rang louder than any hammer, louder than any anvil. It echoed in the recesses of their souls, a promise, a challenge. The clock ticked in the background, each second a reminder that time was relentless, that the world would keep turning, but not without reckoning with the truth. "Let them come," Mary breathed, the words bursting from her lips like the fire from the forge. Around them, the darkness deepened, but so did their resolve. Together, they stood on the precipice of change, and the world that had once confined them felt suddenly vast, ungraspable, and alive. The weight of the past pressed down like an anvil, but Mary felt the pulse of hope thrumming in her veins. Each moment drew closer, the heartbeats of history intertwining with their own. They were women, blacksmiths in both name and action, and they were ready to reshape the world. The fire crackled, the shadows whispered, and the forge became a sanctuary of rebellion, where dreams would no longer remain silent. A storm was brewing, and it was theirs to command. The forge roared, a bellied beast of fire and metal, its heat wrapping around me like the last embrace of a dying lover. I watched the iron twist and curl beneath the hammer's merciless strike, a rhythm echoing the chaos that spiraled outside the guild's thick, soot-stained walls. A single scream cut through the air, a sound so raw, so human, it clawed at my insides. I remember that scream. It was a harbinger of the unrest brewing like a storm on the horizon. Garrick, the guild's master blacksmith, stood at the anvil, sweat mingling with soot, his face a mask of fury and determination. His hands, calloused and scarred, moved with a deadly grace, each blow of his hammer a declaration of war against the encroaching shadows of discord. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his brows knitted together like a tapestry of anguish. They want our blood, he muttered, voice low yet laced with an edge sharp enough to cut. I could see it, another guild, another group of power-hungry men, their eyes glinting with avarice, circling like vultures. And then there was Ilara. She, too, was a blade in the dark, her spirit untouched by the soot and grime of the forge, radiant with an intensity that ignited the very air around her. Even now, as she paced the edges of the room, fury boiling in her chest, I felt the pull of her energy. "We can't let them take what's ours, Garrick." "We can't," she hissed, her voice a tremor of defiance. I could almost taste her desperation, sweet and sharp, a nectar of rebellion. Her fiery red hair danced like flames as she turned toward the door, eyes blazing with the ferocity of a storm. I remember standing there, heart pounding, a spectator to their conflict, caught in the web they wove. Ilara's passion was a tempest, while Garrick's anger lay like a simmering volcano. They were the two sides of a coin, and I, a mere shadow caught between their clashing wills. "You think they'll just back down?" Garrick snarled, voice escalating like the heat from the forge. "They'll cut us down without a second thought. This is no game, Ilara. This is survival." A beat of silence, thick with unspoken fears. I could see it, the ghosts of dreams long buried, the weight of history pressing down on us, unyielding. Outside, the sun hung low in the sky, a fiery eye glaring down on our turmoil. Shadows stretched across the cobblestone streets, thickening with the gathering dusk. The guild was alive with the whispers of betrayal, rumors swirling like smoke, curling into dark corners where doubt took root. I remembered the dream I had last night, the faces of the men who sought our ruin, their eyes burning with hunger, tearing at the fabric of our unity. "They'll break us if we don't stand together," I murmured, my voice cracking under the pressure of the moment. Ilara turned to me, her gaze piercing. "Together? You think we're united?" Her laughter rang hollow, a fragile sound that left a chill in the air. "This guild is a cage, and we're all trapped inside, clawing at the bars while the world beyond laughs at us." I could see the hurt hidden in her bravado, the cracks in her armor, and my heart twisted painfully. Garrick's face shifted, a shadow crossing his features. It was fleeting, but I felt it, the weight of lost dreams, the echo of broken promises. "What's the point of power if it comes at the cost of our souls?" His voice dropped, raw and unsteady. "I forged weapons and armor, but what we need now is not steel but loyalty." The truth hung heavy, a blade poised above our heads, waiting for the moment of reckoning. The forge creaked and groaned, an ancient beast in need of sustenance, and I suddenly realized that we were not just fighting for our craft, but for our very essence, our identity as creators in a world that craved destruction. What if we forged something new? I ventured, a timid spark of hope igniting in the darkness. What if we could unite the guilds, turn our enemies into allies? I felt their eyes on me, searching, probing for sincerity, for conviction. But Ilara's face twisted, a mask of struggle. "You dream too lightly, friend. The world is a battlefield, and we are its pawns." Her words stung, each syllable a reminder that hope could be as fragile as the very metal we shaped. "We can't trust them. They'll stab us in the back as soon as we let our guard down." Garrick's hammer fell silent, the clanging echoing through the stillness, a moment suspended in time, thick with the weight of decisions yet to be made. A sigh escaped him, heavy and resigned. "Then we fight. But this time, we fight smart." The fire in his eyes returned, but now it was mixed with dread, the understanding that loyalty could shatter as easily as glass. The forge swelled around us, an inferno of possibility and despair. I felt the tension tighten, a noose around our dreams, and the world outside was closing in, darker than before. The hourglass of time slipped through our fingers. Would we become the ghosts of our ambitions or the architects of our fate? As the flames danced, I caught sight of the shadows shifting just beyond the forge. They were coming, the wolves at our door, and I could feel the weight of impending doom, a spectre lurking just outside our refuge. The air crackled, charged with anticipation, with the promise of conflict, with the whispers of broken alliances threatening to tear apart the very fabric of our lives. And in that moment, with hearts racing and breaths held tight, we stood on the precipice of a storm. Each second stretched like molten metal, and the world outside teetered on the edge of chaos, waiting for the hammer to fall. The forge, our sanctuary and our prison, pulsed with life as we faced our reckoning, an invitation to rise or fall, united or divided. The fires roared, and our hearts echoed their call, but the question remained, would we answer? The hammer's rhythmic clang reverberated through the air, a heartbeat frozen in time, a pulse of iron and fire. The forge glowed like a wounded star, casting flickering shadows on the soot-streaked walls, shadows that danced like specters of the past, those who had forged their lives in the same relentless heat, and those who had succumbed to a darker fate. Outside, the village lay draped in a shroud of despair, the plague whispering its deadly secrets in the alleys and narrow streets. It was a world where laughter had become a memory, and the cries of the afflicted echoed like a dirge. I stood there, my hands trembling around the cool iron, feeling the weight of mortality pressing down with each strike of the hammer. I remember the first time I met Ilara, her eyes like storm clouds, brewing with unspoken fears. She was the baker's daughter, bringing bread that was more like a stone than sustenance, heavy with the weight of hunger and grief. I was drawn to her, not just by her beauty, but by the fierce resolve etched on her face, a mask hiding the terror lurking beneath. "What are you making?" she asked, her voice barely rising above the crackling flames. I met her gaze, the darkness of the forge contrasting with the light of her spirit. "A sword," I replied, my heart racing. "For those who need to fight." She flinched at the word fight, as if it bore a terrible weight, and I realized how deeply the plague had rooted itself in the minds of the living. I remember, oh, how I remember, the sickle-sweet stench of decay wafting through the village, mingling with the smoke from the forge. It was an odor that clung to your clothes, a reminder that the world was unraveling. Each ring of the hammer was a prayer, a desperate attempt to stave off the encroaching darkness. My father had taught me that blacksmithing was about creation, but now, it felt like a desperate act of defiance against mortality itself. "You're just making tools for a war no one can win," whispered a voice in my head, taunting me. My fingers bled, but I couldn't stop, the forge was the only place that felt alive. Then there was Oren, my brother, a ghost in flesh, his laughter hollow, a mockery of the joy we once shared. We had been inseparable, two souls intertwined like the metal I shaped, but the plague had carved a chasm between us. "Why do you keep working?" he said one day, his voice cracked like old parchment. "You think you can hammer your way through this? It's futile." His eyes, once vibrant, were now dimmed, reflecting the despair that had settled within him. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him until the life returned to his gaze. "We are survival, Oren. Can't you see that?" But he only turned away, lost in the suffocating fog of hopelessness that surrounded us. I remember the night I woke to a scream, the sound slicing through the silence like a blade. It was Ilara. She had come to me, desperation spilling from her lips like the blood from an open wound. "My father is sick," she sobbed, her body trembling, and in that moment, I felt the weight of the world collapse upon my shoulders. "You're a blacksmith, you can help him." But what could I forge to combat the relentless grasp of death? My hammer felt like a toy in a child's hand, useless against the cruelty of fate. "I can't cure him, Ilara," I shouted, my voice cracking, the harsh truth spilling forth. She stood before me, a fragile flame in the encroaching darkness, her eyes searching mine for a flicker of hope. "You must try. Please." And so, I began to forge not just iron, but the weight of our shared fears, hilt and blade, fire and blood. Each swing of my hammer echoed the silent screams of the dying and the desperate prayers of the living. Time twisted around us, a relentless clock ticking away moments that felt both eternal and fleeting. Rumors of death crept through the village like a persistent fog, and the faces of friends and neighbors grew pale, ghosts playing their parts in a macabre theater. I remember the day I found Oren slouched against the wall of our forge, the color drained from his cheeks, breathing shallow and ragged. "I can't breathe," he rasped, the words barely escaping his lips. My heart raced, the world narrowed to the sound of his labored breaths, each one a stolen moment from life itself. I rushed to him, but the weight of inevitability hung heavy in the air. I wanted to forge him a new life, to hammer out the iron of his spirit, but all I could do was watch as he slipped away, a shadow departing into the void. Ilara's father succumbed to the plague a week later, his body wrapped in a shroud of darkness, a silence that resonated like a tolling bell in the pit of my stomach. Ilara stood before the forge, her eyes desolate, a spark extinguished. "What good is your sword if it cannot protect those we love?" she whispered, the words a dagger buried deep in my heart. I wanted to scream, to rail against the universe, but all I could do was hammer on, the anvil ringing hollow with my grief. Days bled into nights, time losing its meaning as the world shrank into the confines of the forge, the only sanctuary left amidst the chaos. The flames danced, mocking me, the echoes of laughter long gone, replaced by the whispers of the dead. "You can't fight fate," a voice echoed in the recesses of my mind, but each strike of the hammer became a desperate prayer, a promise that I would not yield, even as the shadows encroached ever closer. I remember standing before the forge one final time, the air thick with the smell of smoke and despair, the hammer feeling both like a weapon and a weight. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant cries of a village succumbing to its fate. I looked into the fire, the embers swirling like lost souls, and for the first time, the fear gripped me, icy and unyielding. And as I struck the iron, the echo of the hammer rang out, a heartbeat in the silence, the last defiant stand against the darkness, but deep down, I feared it might be an echo of my own mortality, a reminder that in the face of this plague, all we can do is fight, even when the heart longs to surrender. The hammer rang out, a relentless clanging that shattered the air like a cry for help. I could feel the vibrations in my bones, each strike echoing through the cavernous workshop, a heartbeat of industry, a pulse of something dark and unyielding. The smell of metal and sweat hung heavy, thick enough to choke a ghost. My hands trembled, an involuntary response to the chaos surrounding me. I was not alone, I never was. There was Tobias, his face smeared with soot, eyes wild as if he had seen the very soul of the machine. And there was Clara, her hands deftly stitching together the fabric of a future that felt more like a noose than a lifeline. "Faster! We need to keep up!" Tobias shouted, his voice a desperate plea against the roar of the machines that drowned everything, our hopes, our fears, our very humanity. I remember the way he looked at Clara, a spark of something unspoken brewing in the depths of his eyes, an ember of rebellion flickering just beneath the surface. She didn't see it, she was too lost in the rhythm, the monotonous dance of her sewing, the needle moving in and out like a heartbeat, a desperate attempt to stitch together a life that was unraveling around us. I could taste the bitterness of iron, a metallic tang that reminded me of memories long buried, my father crafting wood into magic, hands gentle yet firm, shaping dreams into reality. I remember the warmth of his shop, the love woven into each creation, unlike this sterile monstrosity where the noise consumed the soul. The factory was a beast, hungry and relentless, devouring the artisans we once were. We were now mere cogs, trapped in a machine that didn't care for our stories, for our laughter, or our heartaches. But oh, how it demanded. The clock ticked, a merciless metronome of urgency, striking every hour like a death knell. Each tick sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder that time was running out. I could see it in Clara's eyes, in the way her hands grew weary, her fingers blistered from a labor that felt less like creation and more like punishment. "Do you think it will always be like this?" she asked one night, her voice barely rising above the clamor of the machines. I wanted to tell her it would get better, that the dawn would break for us, but the truth sat heavy on my tongue, a stone that would sink in water. And so, I found myself standing at the precipice of despair, caught between the past and an uncertain future. Tobias, my friend and my anchor, felt it too. "This isn't living, Clara," he said one day, his voice low, trembling with emotion. "This is survival." I watched as the weight of his words settled in the air, thick like fog, pulling us into the depths of a reality we were desperate to escape. But escape seemed impossible. The factory walls loomed like giants, shadows stretching across the floor, swallowing our dreams whole. That night, as we toiled under the flickering gaslight, I caught Clara staring into the abyss of the machines, her eyes glistening with tears that threatened to spill. "I remember," she began, her voice a whisper. "I remember when I used to dance." The admission hung like a ghost between us, a fleeting shadow of what we once were. I wanted to reach out, to cradle her pain, to remind her that life was more than iron and speed. But the machines roared, and the world pressed in, suffocating us. The days drifted into weeks, and each heartbeat felt like a countdown, a reminder of the lives slipping through our fingers like sand. The dream of rebellion flickered in our hearts, a fragile flame against the wind of oppression. I could see it in Tobias's clenched fists, in the way he spoke of strike, of standing up against the oppression that crushed our spirits. But fear also lived there, gnawing at the edges, whispering of consequences that could tear us apart. And then came the day. The air was thick with tension, the machines thrumming like an angry beast, calling us to conform. Tobias stood on a crate, a figure of defiance, his voice cutting through the din, demanding our freedom, the right to control our own lives. We deserve better. We are not just parts of this machine, he shouted, and the words hung in the air, a defiance that dared to challenge the silence. But a storm brewed, and shadows gathered like vultures, sensing the disturbance in the air. Clara's eyes widened, fear and hope warring within her. What if they come for us? Her voice quivered, a fragile thread in the chaos. I felt my heart race, each thump a reminder of the stakes. But Tobias stood firm, his resolve transforming the air around us. I remember the moment, the electric anticipation coursing through my veins. Could this be the moment we broke free? Could this be the spark that set the world ablaze? It was then that the doors burst open, and the overseers stormed in, faces twisted with rage, eyes dark with the promise of punishment. The cacophony of machinery stilled, a silence falling over us like a shroud. My breath caught in my throat, a silent scream trapped within. I watched as Tobias stepped forward, defiance etched on his features, and Clara reached for him, her body a barrier between the beast and the man. "Stand down," the overseer bellowed, his voice a thunderclap. But we were not standing down, we were awakening. I could feel the tension crackle in the air, feel the collective heartbeat of our fears, our dreams, our desires, rising up like a wave, an unstoppable force against the tide of oppression. I remember the moment when everything hung suspended, a breathless breath before a plunge into chaos. The machines roared again, a vengeful chorus, and I was swept away, caught in the tide of voices rising up against the darkness. The factory had become a battlefield, the air charged with the promise of change, of rebellion, and I was alive, alive in the way only hope can make you feel. The shadows whispered, the clocks ticked, and the battle surged, a tide of humanity against the relentless beast of industry. I felt the world shift beneath me, a tremor of possibility rippling through the air. And in that moment, with Clara and Tobias beside me, I knew this wasn't just a clash against machinery, it was a fight for our very souls. A fight we couldn't afford to lose. The furnace roared like a beast, a living, breathing entity that demanded respect. Flames danced, flickering shadows painting the walls in frantic strokes of orange and gold. I stood there, heart hammering against my ribs, the heat wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. My hands, calloused and stained, trembled as I gripped the iron bar, ready to mold it into something fierce, something beautiful. But beauty was a deceptive mistress, and the darkness lurked just beyond the flames. Behind me, I could sense the tension. Jonah, my apprentice, his youthful face marred by worry, stared at the digital readout on the wall, a clock ticking ominously, counting down to an unknown fate. "We should have shut it down," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper above the growl of machinery. I met his eyes, and in that instant, I felt it, a pulse of fear coursing through us both. He was a boy caught in the storm of my obsession, this world of fire and metal, where every strike of the hammer echoed like a heartbeat in the night. I remember the first time I swung a hammer, the thrill of the metal bending to my will, the way my soul sang with every blow. But those were simpler times. In this high-tech world, where algorithms governed our every move, I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. Technology had crept in like a thief in the night, turning our beloved craft into a sterile simulation, a digital recreating of the visceral experience I craved. "Look," Jonah said, pointing at the readout, now flashing red. The furnace was overheating. Panic clawed at my insides, gnawing at my resolve. I could hear my own heart pounding, a drumming that felt far too loud in the stillness that followed. I had seen this happen once before, once too often. I remembered the shop down the street, where a similar furnace had exploded, taking a life with it. A life not unlike mine, full of dreams and iron dust. Shut it off! I yelled, my voice cracking with urgency. The fear in Jonah's eyes ignited something within me. It twisted my stomach, a reminder of my own fragility. I was supposed to be his mentor, a guiding light in this world of fire, yet here I was, standing on the precipice of chaos. He fumbled with the controls, hands shaking. I can't. It won't respond. The furnace roared louder, as if sensing its own impending doom. I felt the heat, an anxious beast ready to pounce. My mind raced, a whirlwind of memories, my father's laughter as he showed me the art of blacksmithing, the warmth of the forge wrapping around us like the embrace of a loved one. But now that warmth felt like a warning. We have to get out, I urged, my throat dry. But even as I spoke, I felt a strange pull, a magnetic force pulling me closer to the fire, an insidious whisper that promised power, an echo of the ancient spirits of the forge. I was torn between the primal call of creation and the stark reality of destruction. Jonah's breath hitched. What about the tools? The legacy. Legacy. I spat, feeling the heat blush my cheeks. What legacy will we have if we're dead? And then I saw it, out of the corner of my eye, a flash of silver. The new plasma cutter glinted under the harsh light, a high-tech marvel of efficiency, but I could feel the malevolence emanating from it, a reminder that innovation didn't come without cost. I had sacrificed the soul of our craft, trading the rugged beauty of the forge for the sterile precision of machines. Behind me, the shadows shifted. They crept closer, wrapping around me like ghosts of the past, whispering of dreams unfulfilled, of fires extinguished too soon. I remember the old days, I murmured, almost to myself, as the heat grew unbearable. I remember when it was just us and the metal, when the only danger was a wrong strike. Jonah's voice broke through my reverie, cracking with desperation. Please? We need to go. I turned, the flickering flames reflecting in my eyes, a war raging within me. I could feel the weight of every choice I had ever made, every path taken, and every path forsaken. The furnace throbbed with life, a beast eager to unleash its fury, and I was its master, for better or worse. But then the world tilted, a shudder running through the ground as the furnace groaned. The digital readout blinked furiously, danger, danger, danger. I closed my eyes, and for a fleeting moment, I was back in that old shop, surrounded by the scent of hot metal, the rhythm of hammer strikes a lullaby. But this wasn't a dream, it was a waking nightmare, and those memories threatened to consume me. Leave! I shouted, pushing Jonah towards the door. Get out, while you can. No, he cried, his voice cracking. I won't leave you. In that moment, I felt the depth of my fears. What had I brought him into? The shadows stretched, as if reaching for him, and the weight of my choices pressed down like a heavy anvil. I realized that the flames weren't just fire, they were a mirror, reflecting every flaw, every regret, every scar I bore. The furnace erupted, a roar of sound that drowned out everything else, a wave of heat washing over us like a tidal surge. I barely had time to shove Jonah to safety before the world exploded in a cacophony of sound and fury. In the chaos, I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, the pulse of the forge resonating through me. The shadows pulled back, and in that moment, something shifted. The flames reached for me, beckoning, promising power if I would only submit. But I wouldn't submit. Not then, not ever. And as the world around me turned to fire and ash, I understood the true danger of this high-tech world. It wasn't the machines, the algorithms, or the sterile efficiency. It was the loss of our humanity, the sacrifice of our passion, the price we paid for convenience. In the heart of the inferno, I stood tall, ready to face the truth, ready to reclaim what was lost, even if it meant facing the shadows that haunted me. I could feel the weight of every choice pressing down, every heartbeat echoing in the chaos, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the fire still burned bright. The hammer strikes an anvil, a resounding crack that slices through the evening air, echoing like thunder, shaking the very ground beneath the feet of the townsfolk shuffling home. Sweat drips from his brow, pooling on the stone floor, mingling with the soot and ash that cling to his skin. Gideon, the blacksmith, is a titan in his forge, where fire bends metal to its will, and the very essence of creation is birthed in sparks. But tonight, the air is thick with something darker than the smoke swirling around him. It tastes like iron and fear, and it stirs the shadows lurking in the corners of his mind. I remember the first time I saw him, the way the flames danced in his eyes, igniting something primal within me. I was just a child, a mere wisp of curiosity, watching as he shaped raw steel with the fury of a tempest. Each swing of his hammer was a heartbeat, a pulse of power that resonated in my bones, whispering tales of heroes and villains forged in the heat of battle. But tonight, it's not the clang of metal that rings in my ears, it's the whisper of betrayal. Elara, his wife, stands just outside the forge, her silhouette framed by the flickering glow, face shadowed in worry, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She's the one who knows, the one who watched as Gideon's resolve cracked like the brittle metal he often shapes. "They're coming," she breathes, and her voice is a rope fraying at the edges, stretching thin with fear. "You need to hide." Gideon's hands tremble, not from the heat of the forge but from the weight of the ghosts that haunt him, memories that suffocate, dreams turned to dust. The townsfolk, once his allies, now see him as a monster, a villain in their hearts. All because of a decision, a choice he made that tore through his life like a sword through flesh. I remember, the day the Duke's men marched into town, armed with accusations sharper than any dagger. "You forged weapons for the rebels," they spat, their eyes ablaze with righteous fury, as if they were the very hand of justice. Gideon stood tall, unyielding, though inside, he felt the world crumbling. Was he a hero for providing the means to fight tyranny, or a villain for igniting flames of rebellion? Sometimes, the line between courage and treachery blurs, leaving behind only the charred remains of conviction. "Gideon!" Elara's voice pulls me back from the precipice of memory, her urgency slicing through the haze of despair. "You can't let them take you." But the truth is, the town once cheered for him, their voices rising like a harmonious song. Children played with wooden swords he crafted, warriors honed their skills with blades he forged. Now, those joyous echoes are muffled, drowned beneath the weight of betrayal. I can see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a tempest brewing, a storm on the verge of breaking. What does it mean to be a blacksmith in a world where steel has become synonymous with blood? He shaped their dreams into weapons, yet the same hands that crafted beauty now threaten to be shackled by fear. "They're not coming for just me, Elara," he murmurs, his voice thick with anguish. "They're coming for everything we built together." I remember the laughter in the air when the townsfolk would gather around his forge, sharing stories like embers drifting in the wind. But now, those stories twist into fables of fear, turning heroes into heartless villains. I can almost hear the whispers now, curling around the corners of the square. "The blacksmith betrays us," they mutter, voices low and conspiratorial. "He breathes the same air as the rebels." The tension thickens, and the forge becomes a crucible of emotion, fire dancing, shadows flickering. Outside, the sound of heavy boots crunching on gravel sends shivers down my spine. The clock tower strikes ominously, its deep toll a reminder that time is slipping away. Elara moves closer, desperation etched on her face. "You can't let them take you. You can't become what they say you are." Her hand grips his, grounding him, tethering him to the moment, a lifeline in a storm-tossed sea. I see the love flicker between them, a flame that refuses to die, even as shadows stretch long and dark. Gideon's heart is a battlefield, torn between the desire to fight and the instinct to flee. "What would you have me do?" he whispers, the weight of the world pressing down on him. "Become a coward? Abandon my craft? My people?" "No," she cries, and it's a fierce shout that reverberates through the very walls of his forge. "Fight for them. Fight for us." The legends weren't made from fear, they were forged in courage. Those words, so simple yet so profound, ignite a spark within him. I can feel it radiating, a warmth breaking through the encroaching chill. He is more than just a blacksmith, he's a symbol of hope, a beacon in the dark. But the shadows won't let him go so easily. The pounding at the door resonates like the beat of a war drum, and I can almost see the faces outside, twisted in rage, fueled by fear. "Gideon," they shout, voices rising like a storm. "You are a traitor. You will pay for your sins." But isn't that the way of the world? Blacksmiths create reality, not just weapons but dreams and destinies. They are both heroes and villains, wielders of power and destruction. The people who once adored him now see only a monster, a figure distorted by fear, a reflection of their darkest selves. Make a choice, Ilara urges, and her eyes bore into his, searching for the man she fell in love with, the man who could shape raw metal into something beautiful. Will you stand, or will you hide? The air crackles with tension, and Gideon's decision hangs in the balance. The clock's relentless ticking quickens, each beat echoing the pulse of fate. In that moment, I feel the weight of history pressing down on me, the lives lived and lost beneath the hammer's strike. With a surge of resolve, Gideon steps forward, leaving behind the shadows of doubt. The forge blazes brighter, illuminating the path ahead, a testament to the fire that burns within him. I can see it in his eyes, the warrior awakening. And as the door shatters beneath the weight of the crowd, I realize this is only the beginning. The confrontation is coming, and with it, the reckoning of a blacksmith's legacy, of love and loss, of creation and destruction, of heroes and villains. In that moment, as I stand witness to the very essence of humanity, the fragility of hope and the fierce tenacity of spirit, I can't help but feel the pulse of history reverberating deep within my soul. The clang of metal on metal, a sound sharp enough to slice through the silence of twilight. A flicker of flame dances like a restless spirit, breathless and wild, casting grotesque shadows that twist and turn on the earthen walls of the forge. The air is thick, choked with the scent of coal and sweat, of heated ambition tempered by desperation. I stand there, heart pounding, as the world outside slips into darkness, but here, in this furnace of creation and destruction, the light feels electric, alive and menacing. I remember the land once lush with green, an endless tapestry of life. Now, beneath my feet, the ground lies cracked, parched. Each vein of earth tells a story of broken promises, of a burgeoning craft that wrestled with nature and lost. The hills that once wore coats of vibrant emerald now wear the scars of blackened soot and rusted debris. A phantom of the past whispers through the shadows, a reminder of what was sacrificed on the anvil of progress. Evelyn stands beside me, her hands raw and blistered, each scar a testament to her commitment to this ancient art. But within her, a storm brews. I can see it in her eyes, swirling like the ashes that dance in the forge heat, the relentless pursuit of perfection clashing with the guilt gnawing at her insides. It's just a tool, she mutters, voice trembling. Just a hammer and anvil. Yet, I know she feels it too, the weight of every swing, the environmental toll that blacksmithing exacts. Each strike resounds like a heartbeat, echoing the agony of the land beneath us. Then there's Thomas, the master blacksmith, his brow furrowed with lines of worry, like cracks in the very ground we forge upon. He pours his soul into every piece, but now, the tremors of doubt ripple through him. The very earth we depend upon is suffocating, gasping for breath under the relentless pressure of our craft. We're fighting a war we can't win, he says, and his voice trembles, not from weakness, but from a realization that feels like a dagger to the heart. For every knife we create, there's a piece of land that dies. I remember the day I first stepped into this forge, starry-eyed and naive, intoxicated by the glow of the fire and the promise of creation. But now, as I look around, I feel the specter of guilt closing in. I feel the shadows stretching, filling every corner, whispering secrets of devastation. The land, our land, once teemed with life, birds soaring, flowers blooming, streams babbling. Now, it's as if nature herself has turned her back on us, casting us out into the cold, unforgiving night. Each swing of the hammer feels heavier, like the weight of 1,000 lost dreams. I remember Evelyn's laughter, bright and melodic, now dulled by the shadow of despair. She often jokes about her obsession with the craft, how she'd rather wrestle a bear than give up blacksmithing, but the laughter feels hollow now, echoing back at us like a ghost of what once was. The trees beyond the forge stand like sentinels, guardians of a forgotten world, their leaves now whispering tales of decay and abandonment. I watch as she strikes the metal, the sparks flying like stars in a universe slowly collapsing. Each glimmer a reminder of the fire we are stoking, not just in the forge, but within ourselves. The air vibrates with tension, thick enough to cut. Thomas grips the edge of the anvil, as if the solid iron could ground him against the tumult of emotion swirling in our hearts. I can see it in his eyes, the conflict between his love for the craft and the guilt that gnaws at him like a hungry beast. "Nothing stays the same," he whispers, almost to himself, as if seeking solace in the truth. "What we forge today steals from tomorrow." I remember the day we found the river, once a shimmering ribbon of life, now a sickly shade of brown, choked by the waste we've cast aside in our pursuit of craftsmanship. The fish, once abundant, now lie belly up, victims of our negligence. I see the ghosts of generations past, their eyes hollow, watching us with disappointment, their whispers mingling with the wind, urging us to remember. Evelyn strikes again, her blows fierce yet tinged with sorrow. The rhythm of her hammering becomes a heartbeat, each impact thrumming with the pulse of a world in mourning. "What are we doing?" she cries out, the anguish spilling from her lips as if she could pour her heart into the molten metal. "What price do we pay for beauty?" And even as we toil, even as the forge crackles with life, I can feel the land beneath us shifting, weeping for what it has lost. The air thickens with despair, each breath a reminder of our own complicity in this cycle of destruction. I catch a glimpse of my reflection in the steel, and I see not just a blacksmith but a participant in this dance of degradation, a silent accomplice to a crime against nature. I remember the dreams I once held close, visions of a thriving landscape, of a world where industry and nature coexist in harmony. Now, those dreams feel like a distant memory, like echoes in the vastness of the cosmos, fading into oblivion. The clock ticks relentlessly, counting down the seconds until we either rise to reclaim our world or fall, consumed by our own creations. Tonight, as the flames leap higher and the shadows grow bolder, a reckoning looms. Thomas straightens, the weight of his guilt transforming into a resolve that crackles in the air, palpable. "We can change," he insists, though doubt lingers in his voice like smoke. "If we can't save the land, what are we even forging?" Through the haze of heat and despair, our eyes meet, and in that moment, I realize, this fight is not just for us. It's for the land, for the future, for the very essence of life that hangs in the balance. The air is electric, charged with our shared determination, fear, and hope. It's a moment that stretches beyond time, a breath held in anticipation, as the first echoes of change ripple through the forge. What comes next is uncertain, a tapestry waiting to be woven with threads of resilience. But for now, we stand at the edge, hearts pounding, souls laid bare beneath the weight of our choices, as the night wraps around us, heavy with promise and peril. And as the flames flicker and dance, I know, this is just the beginning. The forge has ignited not just metal, but a fire within us all that refuses to be extinguished. What we create, what we sacrifice, will ripple through the ages, binding us to the land, for better or for worse, in a tale yet to unfold. The hammer strikes the anvil. A sound so visceral, it echoes through the night like a heartbeat, a pulse that reverberates in the chest of every onlooker. Sparks fly, little stars exploding into existence and then extinguishing, leaving nothing but the dark embrace of the night. The blacksmith, a towering figure with arms like iron, stands there, sweat dripping from his brow, breathing life into metal. His eyes, dark as a moonless sky, reflect the fire crackling beside him, a chaotic dance of destruction and creation. I remember that moment vividly. I was crouched behind the wooden stall, the cold earth pressing against my skin, my heart racing, not just from the spectacle before me, but from the weight of expectation. The villagers had gathered, faces painted with fear and awe, as if we were witnessing a resurrection or an execution. The blacksmith, Tarek, was more than a craftsman, he was a shaman, conjuring spirits from the depths of the forge. I remember my friend, Gina, beside me, her small hands trembling, her wide eyes fixed on the man who could bend metal like it was a living thing. "We shouldn't be here," she whispered, and I felt the chill in her voice, a warning of something lurking in the shadows. But I couldn't tear my gaze away. Tarek was the embodiment of fire and fury, his hammer singing an ancient song, a rhythm that thrummed through the very ground we stood on. But then, there was a crack, a sharp, heart-stopping sound. Tarek's hammer slipped. The molten metal splashed like a bloody tear on the floor. The crowd gasped, a collective breath caught in our throats, as if the world itself held its breath, teetering on the edge of chaos. In that moment, I saw the fear flash across his face, a fleeting glimpse of vulnerability. What if he failed? What if those who had come to witness his mastery left disappointed? The thought was palpable, an electric charge that crackled in the air. Tarek's hands, usually steady as the mountains, shook slightly as he gripped the hammer again, casting a shadow of doubt over the fire's light. Gina's voice broke through the silence again, a whisper laced with urgency, "We should go." But my heart was already ensnared. I was wrestling with something deeper than curiosity. Blacksmithing wasn't just a craft, it was a reflection of our cultures, our identities, woven into the fabric of history. In that moment, I remembered my grandfather's stories, tales of blacksmiths who forged not just tools, but destinies. Tarek struck the anvil once more, harder this time, the sound ringing through the night. A shiver danced down my spine. He was not merely molding metal, he was wrestling with fate itself, his ancestors watching, waiting. Then there was Lynn, a young woman from the distant hills, her presence both fierce and fragile, filled with the weight of her own journey. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands clasped, knuckles white, as if trying to hold on to something that threatened to slip away. I could see the fire in her eyes, the rage simmering just beneath the surface, a rage born from generations of being overlooked, of being dismissed. In her culture, the blacksmith was not just a worker but a guardian of stories, a keeper of secrets. "He doesn't know," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "He doesn't know what he's up against." I remembered my own fears, those quiet demons that whispered doubts in the dead of night. Tarek, with every hammer strike, was not just forging metal, he was forging his identity. But what if the world he inhabited didn't allow for such a transformation? What if his fire extinguished, leaving nothing but cold, hard steel behind? The crowd shifted, a wave of anxiety rippling through us like a gust of wind. I could feel it pressing against my chest, a tangible thing, a reminder that we were all woven together in this moment. Tarek was fighting not just against the metal but against the expectations, the weight of history, and the ghosts of those who had come before him. Forged by fire, tempered by fate, I murmured under my breath, a mantra that echoed in the silence. Those words held power, ancient, haunting. What did it mean to be forged? To endure the heat? To emerge stronger? Then came the crescendo, the climactic moment. Tarek, with sweat glistening on his brow, raised the hammer high. The fire danced in his eyes, and in that instant, the world slowed. Every heartbeat was a drum, every breath a prayer. "This is for all of us," he seemed to say, voice barely escaping his lips, a whisper lost in the roaring flames. And then, he struck. The metal sang, a high-pitched wail that pierced the night, a sound that would resonate through time. The crowd held its breath, the universe paused. Tarek transformed the hot, liquid metal into something exquisite, something beautiful, a blade, a life, a legacy. I caught Gina's gaze, and in that moment, we shared a fear, a triumph, a bond forged not just by friendship but by our shared humanity. Lynn's expression shifted, the shadows of doubt giving way to a flicker of hope. This was a moment of unity, of understanding that transcended our differences. I remember thinking that blacksmithing, in every culture, was a dance with destiny. It was a thread that wove through time, an eternal struggle against the forces that sought to shape us. And as the blade took form, I felt a shift in the air, a palpable energy binding us all. The hammer fell again, and the sparks ignited the darkness. The night was alive, throbbing with the pulse of ancient tales and future dreams. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the clock tower chime, each toll a reminder of the fragile passage of time, each echo a ghost whispering in the winds of change. We stood there, suspended in a moment that would never truly end, the weight of our stories pressing against our hearts, an unbreakable bond formed in the forge of life. And it was here, in this intersection of cultures, that the true power of blacksmithing was revealed, not just as a craft, but as a language spoken through fire, metal, and the indomitable human spirit. The hammer strikes the iron with a ferocity that reverberates through the air, punctuating the stillness of the night. Each clang is a heartbeat, a rhythm of creation forged in sweat and despair. I stand before the forge, the flames licking at my skin like memories too hot to touch, too vivid to forget. In the shadows, ghosts linger, flickering specters of blacksmiths long gone, their faces etched with the same weariness I feel. The weight of their legacy hangs heavy, like the anvil that once bore the burden of their dreams and struggles. My hands tremble, wielding the hammer, but it's not just the heat that makes me falter, it's the spectre of my father watching, an echo of his voice urging me to be better, to carry the torch. You've got to make something worth remembering, he'd say, his breath hot against my cheek. But what is worth remembering? The world outside is filled with chaos, and here I am, hammering away in this old smithy, trying to make a name in a lineage of giants. My heart races as I strike the iron. Will I ever be worthy of their legacy? And then there's Rosa, my sister. She stands at the door, silhouetted against the flickering light, her arms crossed defiantly. You need to stop, she says, her voice a raw edge of frustration. You're losing yourself in this. Can't you see it? I can't. I won't. I remember the way our father's face lit up when we crafted swords meant for heroes, and I feel that fire within me still. But there's a storm brewing inside her too, a tempest of expectations, of dreams deferred. I can't be the one to carry this alone, she whispers, vulnerability cracking her fierce facade. We need to remember them together. Each word she speaks scrapes against my heart like steel on stone, sharpening the tension between us. I want to scream, to push her back into the darkness where the painful memories won't find her. But I also want to pull her closer, to show her the beauty in our craft, the power in the sparks that fly. They won't forget us, I shout, desperation clawing at my throat. We are their legacy. We have to fight for it. I glance back at the fire, where the flames twirl and dance, casting eerie shadows that feel like hands reaching for something lost. Time slips away like the molten metal that pools beneath my hammer. I remember our mother's stories, her voice wrapping around us like a warm blanket on cold nights, tales of blacksmiths who shaped the very fabric of our world. She told us of battles fought not on fields but in the hearts of those who wielded the swords. Every mark you make is a story, she'd say. Don't forget that. The night thickens, a weight pressing down upon my chest. I hear the echoes of the past, blacksmiths who shaped their destinies with fire and iron, whose names are etched in the annals of history. I want to scream their stories into the night, to let the world know that we are still here, still fighting, still forging. But with every blow of my hammer, I feel Rosa's eyes burning into me, a reminder of the cracks forming between us. Look around, she implores, stepping closer, her voice a whisper against the crackle of the fire. This place is haunted. It's time we remembered them not just in iron but in our hearts. I can see the pain in her eyes, a mirror reflecting my own fears. She holds out her hand, trembling, a plea wrapped in frailty. We need to share this burden. And there it is, the raw truth that cuts deeper than any sharp blade. This legacy we're trying to uphold, it's too heavy for one. I can feel the history pressing down on us, a weight that threatens to crush our spirits. The laughter, the stories, the warmth of our parents, it's all fading, slipping through our fingers like ash in the wind. No, I say, choking on the words, the truth too devastating to face. I can't let it go. I can't let them down. Yet, in her eyes, I see a flicker of understanding. We won't let them down if we remember together. We can share their stories, their struggles. We can honor them with more than just fire. The air is thick with unspoken words, memories tangled in the silence that stretches between us. I watch as she takes a deep breath, steadying herself for the weight of this moment. Do you remember the time we made that sword for the festival? The one that shattered all the expectations. Her voice is soft, coaxing me back from the brink I'm teetering on. I nod, the memory rushing in like a wave. The laughter, the shared triumph, it was a moment of pure bliss, a sliver of light in a world that often felt shrouded in darkness. We were a team, I whisper, the truth settling around us like a warm embrace. Exactly, she breathes, hope threading through her words. Let's be that team again. Let's make them proud, not just with iron, but with our hearts. The fire crackles, flickering shadows around us, illuminating the path we could take. I feel the pulse of history flowing through my veins, a legacy not just of the past but of a future yet unwritten. Together, we could remember. Together, we could forge a new path. The anger, the pain, it's all still there, but now there's a flicker of something else, possibility. And as I lift my hammer once more, I can't help but think this act is more than just shaping iron, it's about shaping ourselves. The legacy of blacksmiths isn't just found in the metal we mold but in the hearts we touch, the stories we share, and the memories we honor. The forge flames cast a glow on our faces, and for the first time, I see hope reflected in Rosa's eyes, twin flames burning bright against the cold night. Together, I whisper, and as the hammer strikes with renewed vigor, I feel the echoes of the past intertwining with the promise of the future, forging a legacy that is ours. The ghosts of the forge may linger, but now, their whispers are not just of sorrow but of remembrance and resilience, guiding my hands as we craft something that will endure beyond the shadows. The night stretches on, endless as the cosmos, and the forge glows with a fierce intensity, illuminating the darkness, reminding us that while the past may haunt us, it can also guide us. We hammer onward, together, relentless in our quest to remember, to honor, and to create a legacy that will never fade. The furnace roared like a beast awakened, the heat curling around me, wrapping me in a frantic embrace, as if the very essence of fire conspired to consume. Sparks flew, flaring against the dimly lit forge, each one a flicker of a half-formed dream. I stood there, gripping the hammer, my heart drumming a wild symphony, drowning out the world. I remember the first time I swung it, the weight, the rhythm, the feeling of shaping destiny with every strike. But here, in the belly of the beast, it felt different, a haunting urgency. Across the forge, Malik's brow furrowed, sweat tracing paths down his face, a tapestry of worry etched in his features. He was a master of the craft, a soul intertwined with iron, yet the uncertainty of tomorrow loomed over him like a dark cloud. "Is it worth it?" he shouted, his voice cracking, each word a revelation laced with fear. "Every swing, every breath, every dream of this place." He stopped, staring into the fire, the flames reflecting a future that felt impossibly fragile. I remember our laughter once. The way we joked about turning iron into gold, about becoming legends in our own right. But the world had changed, the hum of machinery silencing the ancient songs of our trade. The clang of the hammer against the anvil felt like a death knell to my ears. And then there was Amina. A storm wrapped in silk, a fierce heart beating against the odds. She stood at the entrance, shadows clinging to her like a second skin. "We need to adapt," she urged, her voice a soft but relentless tide, yet it broke against Malik's despair. "There's a future waiting, you know? We can innovate. We can, not without losing our soul," he interrupted, the words bursting forth like a dam. "You think the world cares about our traditions? They want efficiency, not artistry." I felt a chill gnaw at my core, the fight slipping away like smoke through my fingers. I looked at Amina, her resolve unyielding, yet I could see the cracks in her facade, determination wrestled with doubt. "What if we can have both?" she whispered, her eyes alight with a flicker of hope, the kind that could either ignite a blaze or fizzle into nothingness. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to seize that hopeful thread and weave it into a tapestry of dreams, but my heart ached with the weight of the past. I remember the stories of our ancestors, of warriors adorned in armor, of their blades gleaming under the sun, forged in fires that whispered promises of glory. But those stories felt like ghosts, faint echoes in the growing shadows of our modern world. Amina stepped closer, the light from the forge casting an otherworldly glow on her face. "We can create tools that honor our craft. Smart implements that respond to the needs of the world, tools," Malik scoffed, the word dripping with derision, "or toys for the lazy." His eyes flared, and the intensity of his passion nearly knocked me back. I could see it then, the clash of ideologies, the fear of obsolescence battling against the pulse of progress. The forge trembled around us, the air thick with tension, thick enough to cut, but then, a sudden bang echoed, the door slamming shut as a gust of wind howled, howling like a banshee, drowning our words. Outside, the world was changing, the city alive with the hum of electric dreams and digital ambitions. And here we were, trapped in the past, the heat of the forge battling the chill creeping in. "I'm not ready to be forgotten," Malik's voice broke, a raw edge that cut through the air like a blade. "Not like this. Not in silence." Amina reached for him, her fingers brushing against his arm, an unspoken solidarity binding them together. Then let's find a way. Let's not let our history slip into the void. Let's infuse our legacy with innovation. We can be both the past and the future. I felt the weight of their words pressing upon me, suffocating in its intensity. The sounds of the city outside seemed to fade, and all that remained was the rhythm of our hearts, thump, 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 like an ancient drum calling us to battle, to rise, to transform. Remember, I said, my voice a mere whisper, but it surged with a desperate strength. The fire doesn't just consume. It transforms. My own hands trembled, the hammer heavy with the weight of possibility. Memories flickered through my mind, a blade forged in the heat of passion, a vision of the future melding into the very soul of our craft. Malik looked at me, his eyes widening, realization dawning like the first light of dawn. Together, he breathed, the words spilling from his lips like a prayer, we can make it shine again. Amina smiled, the warmth of her spirit igniting the forge anew. Together, she echoed, and I felt hope blossom in that moment, fierce and wild. But the tension remained, a tightrope strung high above an abyss, where failure could send us tumbling into darkness. Would we rise or fall? The old ways and the new danced around us, ghosts entwined in a haunting waltz. The furnace roared, and in that instant, I knew we stood at the precipice, challenges ahead, innovations at our fingertips, a legacy weighing on us like an anvil. With a deep breath, I raised the hammer once more, feeling the pulse of the forge thrumming beneath my feet, a heart alive with unquenchable fire. And as the flames flickered, casting playful shadows upon our faces, I remembered the cosmos, the endless tapestry of stars, the promise of tomorrow. I felt the weight of history in my bones, but also the thrill of an unwritten story, one that breathed and lived among us, waiting to be forged anew.